Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. False cypress and spirea are great landscape options. Today we're going to talk about them. Also, if you're thinking about hiring a landscape professional, we have a few tips to help you out. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Joellen Dimond. Joellen is a TSU Extension agent in Tipton County, and Celeste Scott is here. Celeste is a UT Extension agent in Madison County.
Yes,
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Joellen, we're going to talk about some great landscape options. The first one we'll talk about, false cypress. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
It's the chamaecyparis. There's a lot of them. It's a coniferous evergreen, which means it stays green all year long, which is nice in the landscape. There is a very large, diverse group. There are 60 feet plus trees in it, and there are dwarf miniature plants that only measure in inches. So and
that is dwarf.
It's a very diverse group and large. Now, some of them are fast growing and some of them are slow growing.
Okay.
The ones that are fast growing tend to be the larger ones. Some of the rock garden and small ones, they don't grow very fast at all, which is why they only stay inches tall.
Okay. So that makes sense. Okay.
And the larger ones are used like hedges, you know, in the landscape. You know, you can get several of them and make a little hedge, get different kinds, and mix it up with other plants because you don't want a monoculture in a hedge. Then some of the smaller ones, because they're so unique in their shapes and sizes and colors, that they're mostly used as specimens. You can put them in a container or just in the landscape, but you don't en masse plant them.
Okay.
It's not one of those kind of plants. It's more of a specimen specialty plant.
Okay.
And of course, the chamaecyparises that are most used in the South are the obtuse and passifera varieties and cultivars of those, and there are many of them, many, many, many. A lot of the leaves are curled and twisted, and some of them are just like little cords. And they're all very, very interesting and unique in their own shapes and sizes. They like well-drained soil.
Okay.
So we don't tend to have that so much in the South, in this area. So, you know, try to create a condition where there is a well-drained area.
Okay.
Now, I have successfully planted these in the ground, but I was careful of where I placed them, and I've had them for years.
Okay.
But you do have to worry about that, and they do like sun, so don't give them too much shade.
Full sun?
Not full sun.
Not full sun.
But, well, the larger varieties like full sun, but the smaller varieties could use some shade here in this area.
Okay.
But they can take quite a bit of sun. Container is a good place to put them. In fact, the smaller varieties really do well in rock gardens. And the new hypertufa containers that they're making, they always want a dwarf, you know, chamaecyparis to put in there because they're so unique and they're so small. Okay. They're relatively free of insect pests too. Nothing really
That's a good thing.
gets on them. Now I have seen bagworms get on them, but of course, you know, bagworms get on
They get on everything.
They get on.
That sounds pretty good though.
It's easy care. I like that. Put it in a pot. Doesn't need much water. Can take some sun.
I think I could do that.
Cute little specimen plants. That sounds exciting.
Now there's one more I want to mention.
Go ahead and mention.
And that is the false cypress that is native to the United States.
Oh, sure.
There's one that's native. It starts in Maine, goes down to it's a coastal plant mostly.
Okay.
In Maine, down to Florida, and then in Alabama and Mississippi. And you'll find it in wet areas, which is why it is so unusual, because the others don't particularly care for that much water.
I got you.
But since these are larger cypresses and they like the sunshine, they have figured out they don't want to be in competition with everything else that's around around them. So they have found that if they live in a wet area, they can get into full sun.
Okay. And what's the name of that variety?
It's thoides.
Okay.
Thyoides. Thoides. Chemacypris thoides. And it is native to the United States. And what they're trying to do, there are quite a few cultivars of it that are going, so that it might be available, but it might be available in a catalog. It may not be in a garden center around you. You should have one or two somewhere. They're just so unusual and interesting.
All right. So Joellen says get one or two of those.
You've convinced me. I'm getting one.
That sounds good. All right. Now let's talk about spirea.
Yes.
So what do we need to know about planting spirea?
Spirea likes well-drained soil.
Okay. Well-drained soils, right?
But it's really not particular about where it's planted.
Okay.
So, but it doesn't want to be in boggy, wet feet.
Okay.
The ones that you think of the most are the first ones that bloom in the spring. They're usually white.
Mm-hmm.
There's different varieties of those, and they're usually big.
A lot of people, do they call them like bridal veil?
Yeah, bridal wreath spirea
bridal
is
wreath.
one of them.
Okay.
And those are the older varieties.
Yes, that's what I always hear about.
And they
those.
are nice, but a lot of people don't have 5, 7 feet
They're big.
tall and wide to a place to plant them. So there is, if you want a spring blooming one, there is another one that has been developed. It's called Snow Mound. And it blooms when their leaves just start coming out on it, but it has these big, huge corms or groups of flowers that are really pretty. So they're not single on the stems like the others.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Like
I got
clusters.
you.
They're
Yeah,
clusters.
As you go
Right.
down along it.
And they're very,
That
very
sounds-
pretty.
That sounds beautiful. And it's smaller, more
It's a
compact.
little bit smaller,
Oh,
maybe 4 or 5 feet. So it's still a large shrub, fairly
Snow
large
mound.
shrub, but you can keep it pruned. But all of those that I've just talked about bloom in the spring. So, as a
Nice.
rule of thumb, when we prune them is after they finish blooming. So
Right.
that's how you can control their height.
Now, didn't we plant some spirea in our family plot bed out front?
Yes, and that is what the exciting part of spireas are for me, are the dwarf spireas.
Okay.
They get about 3 feet or lower in height. And the one we planted out front was Anthony Waterer.
That's right. Right.
It's got that lavender pink bloom on it.
I like that.
They start blooming in May and June, and then they'll bloom, almost the summer until it gets really, really hot. And then it'll be sporadically. It just won't be as a full bloom. And so,
So it's kind of like separate from the other first ones that we
Yes,
talked about a
yes.
minute ago, a different,
These
summer
are-
type
These
spirea.
are some of them are related to the others, but these are the cultivars that they've developed, which has really been exciting. There's one that I like called Gold Flame.
Cool name.
It has a russet red foliage and yellow in the springtime, and then it has pink flowers on it, but the foliage fades as it gets hotter, so it'll get a little bit more green, and sometimes it ends up being green. Mine is green right now because it's gone through the summer. But in the fall, it picks up the fall colors of russet and orange and yellow
Yeah, I
again,
like those colors.
which
Yeah.
is nice.
Those are
And it
real nice
holds
fall
its
colors.
leaves a little bit longer than a lot of other deciduous shrubs. So
Right.
it does have, I like it for the foliage. To me, the flowers are kind of insignificant,
Okay.
but the foliage is spectacular, and there's a lot of people who like it, and it's easy to find. The smallest one that's easy to find in the nurseries and garden centers is called Little Princess. And it's really cute. It doesn't get more than around a foot and a half tall.
It's small.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's small. It has pink flowers. It's got green foliage, nice green foliage, and for the modern landscape that doesn't always have space, I mean, these smaller spireas will give you blooms in June and July when there's not
nothing
a lot of
else.
things
Right.
are
That's
blooming.
Right. That's right. All right, well, Joellen, we definitely appreciate that good information. Good landscape options there. Thank you much. There are a number of gardening events going on in the next couple of weeks. Here are just a few that might interest you. All right, so let's talk about dealing with the landscape pros, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what do we need to start with that?
Well, really what I like to throw out there first is just the questions that I get in the office, so frequently are folks have hired some professionals to come in, do some landscaping around their home, whether it was redoing something that was old that they didn't particularly like, or it's a new home that's being built, and they're just not satisfied with it. They've spent the money and the time and the effort to get it done, and it's not what they didn't end up with what they thought they were going to get, if that makes any sense. And so I just think that it's important to educate people about the different types of professionals that you could hire to do these jobs, plan these jobs, talk about what the differences are in them, and then just give some tips on how to, be more successful with your end product.
Yeah, well, let's talk about those types of professionals then. Let's do that.
So the first professional that I always want to bring up is a landscape architect.
Okay.
So those folks are going to have advanced degrees, in that area. They don't necessarily have to be plant people, okay? And we'll get into who might be more plant people oriented in a little bit. But what they're looking at is the overall master plan. So they're able to incorporate, if you need to make changes to the exterior of your home to make it go along with this master plan, if you're wanting to incorporate some parking, if you need to keep slope in mind, you need to think about irrigation, installing irrigation. They're kind of seeing the whole picture instead of just looking at what you're going to plant in your beds. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense.
They have engineering.
Right, engineering experience.
Yeah, so they know how to move a lot of dirt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're here to make this big plan. Then, oftentimes, the architects may employ a landscape designer to help them make those particular plant choices and do the plant designs. Now, if your project isn't quite that extensive, I would say you may be able to forego the landscape architects because they will be definitely more pricey.
Yes.
They may charge by the hour, or they may charge for an entire project. Or installments of projects. If it's a big situation, they may want to do it, in compartments. So we'll talk a little bit about the difference in the architects and a designer. A designer possibly is going to be more plant oriented. They're going to know a lot more about plant material, what's going to do well in certain sites. They tend to have more of a artistic kind of flair, Hopefully they're going to be able to communicate well with you and find out what your style is. It would be really similar to if you had someone come into your home and you wanted them to help you decorate your living room. They look at things you already have, kind of what your style already looks like, and then try to implement that.
That sounds like Joellen.
Yeah, there you go. Help you pick the plants that you need. Right plants, right place, right?
Yes, sir.
So again, it's going to be really important to communicate well with them. So the third professional is a landscape contractor, which those are the folks who are actually going to do the installments of your projects. So maybe they're the ones who are preparing the beds. They're the ones who are installing the plants. The ones who are, if you're getting a new patio laid or having lighting installed, they're the people who are going to be subcontracted out to actually do the work. Often cases, again, if it's a smaller project, your landscape designer may be willing to do those himself. And so he's not, going to employ that extra contractor. But those are the three basic, professionals, and I just, I feel like it's really important that everybody, understands the differences between
good
each
descriptions.
role.
Yeah, that's real good stuff. Now, what about the tips for success?
Okay, good. So I've got quite a few tips, but we'll skim over a few. I think it's super important that you build a relationship with your designer, contractor, whoever it is that you've chosen to work with. So when I say build a relationship, you need to be open and able to communicate, clearly with them. So I would recommend having a sit-down meeting. You need to have a budget in place before you start making plans, because sometimes, you tell them all this stuff you want, and then they tell you how much it's going to cost, and you're like, oh, never mind. So you've already started off on the wrong foot. So let's tell them up front how much we're willing to spend on this project. That's super important. Let's be really open about what we want from those areas. Do we need an area for pets? Do we need areas for the kids to play? Are we more interested in having just a basic foundation planting? Possibly, I hear this a lot, folks are plant collectors. People who love to garden, they want to buy plants themselves throughout the years and add them to their landscape. So if what you need are bones, the bones and the, you know, good structure, let's be clear with them on that so that they don't overplant and get it too full, and then they haven't left you any room for you to put your own spin, you know, on this situation. So I think those are some good tips as far as being able to build a relationship. I also like to have a contract with them, make sure we sign a contract just concerning budget, time frame, the guarantees of their work. If they're gonna have, you know, say that these plants aren't going to die because I planted them right, or, you know, we're willing to come in and help fix things if something, you know, was installed incorrectly, so on and so forth, different things like that. So I think it's good to be covered with that. Some other things to keep in mind are, you know, site analysis. So before you start this project, we need to be able to locate all of our lines, you know, call 811, know where all your buried lines are. If you are aware of like wet areas, that can be a huge problem, especially with new homes who have a lot of soil that's been brought in that maybe isn't topsoil and it's not going to drain properly because it's really heavy soils. So landscape designers, most of them are going to have some good solutions on how to help you correct those drainage issues before we start planting. Being able to identify if you have a hard pan, you know, 1.5 feet underneath the soil and you've installed all these plants and now it's holding water and they all die and you're not sure why. So just being able to kind of analyze some of those site issues before you start would be another tip of mine. And then I think one of the most important tips that I could say is to identify your own personal garden style. And a lot of times I think it's more important to communicate with them what you don't like. You know, I feel like it's easier sometimes to say, I don't like this, than this is exactly what I want. A lot of people are never going to know exactly what they want or exactly how they want it to look, but they know what they don't want it to look like for sure. So I think that that is super important. If you don't know what your garden style is, I say just, you know, go to some botanical gardens, go to some local private homes, tour their gardens.
Do the Master Gardener garden tours.
Do the Master Gardener through our garden gates tours and get some ideas, you know.
Or at least go to a nursery. Local nursery and look at the plants, say, oh, I like this and I like this. Write the name down so that, you know, you have that to communicate. Definitely, definitely. So I think those are some of the major tips that I would have for being successful.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, thanks.
Good stuff.
Yeah. I think that, you know, it never hurts to try to prepare as much as you can on the forefront so that you are pleased with what you end up with.
All right. Well, they will definitely be pleased. All right. Thank you much. That was good stuff.
You're welcome.
All right.
Here with one of the fun elements of our home gardens, which are volunteer plants. This is a beautiful gourd which actually grew out of the compost pile, I believe. And so it's gorgeous climbing the fence, but the question that it brings up is, what exactly genetics does it have, right? And so that brings the question of, was this grown from a hybrid? How was it cross-pollinated? And so there are lots of times, especially with different kinds of vining crops in our garden, when we can actually get cross-pollination. We could plant a hybrid seed that we know exactly what it is, and it will come true that first year. But if we save that seed, if it's cross-pollinated with something else, we may end up with something a little bit different the next few years. So seed saving can be fun, but we want to be sure that we know what pollinated it and what we're looking for the second year.
All right, here's our Q&A session. You ladies ready for these?
I'm ready.
Sure.
These are good questions.
Yes, they are.
All right, let's start with the first viewer email. What are the best pre-emergents to use for lawns here in the Mid-South? When should I apply them? And this is from Lou, South Haven, Mississippi. So, Celeste,
Yeah.
what are the best pre-emerge herbicides out there?
Aw, well, I hate to be biased.
Okay.
We've got a lot of options out there, so I'll just get real with you. We've got, Pendulum, Dimension, Barricade. These are all common pre-emerge
Yeah, very common.
herbicides that are available to homeowners. Any residential folks can buy them and use them. I think most people in the Mid-South are using pre-emerge to help control crabgrass in annual warm season grass in their established Bermuda or warm season lawns, whether that's zoysia or what have you. And these products will work for that. And if your main objective is crabgrass pre-emerge, application time needs to be around like late February, early March.
Exactly.
And on the label, they'll actually have recommendations for a split application so that you can make that control last longer. So you'll make your second application 6 to 8 weeks after the first one. And so instead of just getting that 30 to 45-day control, you're extending it to more like maybe 30, maybe even up to 90-day control. Some of these products can also have some pre-emergent effectiveness for select broadleaf weeds.
Right.
So if your issue is more having problems with annual cool season weeds, henbit, dead nettle, things like that.
Which is actually germinating now.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now.
Some late summer, July applications might be reasonable, and some folks that even enjoy a fall application of a pre-emerge for some of those that maybe germinate a little later, or maybe the seed that aren't going to come up until January, February even.
Right.
So you have the potential for 4 applications of pre-emerge, but really I wouldn't do all of those. I just would identify what my main issue was.
Sure.
Is it broadleaf weeds, cool season, or is it those annual warm season grasses like crabgrass, and then decide accordingly.
And all of those that you mentioned are readily available to the homeowners. Please read and follow the label.
Yes, please.
All right, so there you have it, Ms. Lou. Thank you much for the question. Here's our next via email with a picture. I have a Granny Smith apple tree in my backyard that is 5 years old. It has not grown much since I planted it. There's a white furry spot on one of the branches. Do you know what this is? Also, the past couple of years, it has what looks like sores in the bark. The affected bark on the branches are dark and enlarged. Early in the year, after it puts on new leaves, some of the branches will completely die. I would love to save the tree, but am not sure if it is worth saving. What do I need to do? Thank you. And this is from Miss Deborah right here in Cordova. So let's go back to the first question.
Okay.
All right. White furry spots on one of the branches. Do we know what that is?
I think so.
Yeah.
Do we know what that is?
What do you think it is?
It's an insect.
Uh-huh.
And well, and it's like the spittlebug, but it's not. It's the woolly.
It's the woolly apple aphid.
Woolly apple aphid. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
I
it.
was just trying to make sure
Yeah.
that I was on the right
Yeah,
page.
that's
You own
a
it.
woolly apple aphid. Yeah, and it reminds me of the spittlebug because they both hide underneath their little white foam
Yeah,
or
the
the
cottony
white
mass
cotton
is
mass.
what it looks
yeah.
like, right.
And it likes to sit there underneath there and feed on your plant.
Yeah, because it has pierce-sucking mouth parts.
Yeah.
Of course, and it produces those long, white, waxy strands. Actually, for protection is why it does that.
Yeah.
So it's
From
protection
chemicals.
from chemicals and
Yeah.
predators.
There you
Yeah, I was
go.
gonna say they don't want the bugs.
so they're
I mean, the
pretty
birds
smart.
come down and eat
Right.
on them. So.
And I think, I know that she's only seen that one spot of those, so I don't think that's probably not causing all these other issues
No,
that she
no.
was talking about. But they can be detrimental to young trees,
Sure.
and there are some rootstocks that are actually resistant to the woolly apple aphid. So if that were
an option.
becoming the major problem, I would say a selection of a variety that has the appropriate rootstock would be the best option
Exactly
there.
right.
But I think there's other things going on here as
Exactly
well.
right, because again, those aphids will feed on limbs and on the roots. All right, but yeah, that's another issue. So because she has an affected area bark on the branches that are dark and enlarged, those are cankers.
Yeah.
Okay, and those cankers are pretty much formed by black rot fungus. So what you need to do is get in there and prune those out.
At least, what would you say, 6 to 8 inches into healthy wood?
I definitely would.
Yeah.
I sure would. Yeah, those need to be pruned out, Miss Deborah. Make sure you don't have any rotten fruit on the tree. You know, you need to get that off the tree and get them off the ground as well. Practice good sanitation. And I think that'll get you.
Yeah,
So do you think she should try to save this tree, or it's been 5 years, it hasn't
It's been
grown
5
much?
years.
I'm thinking I might.
Depends on how big it is and if it has produced any fruit for her.
True.
Yeah.
And if it is and she wants to save it, that's fine. But I would also suggest, like Celeste said, is there's some other varieties.
Right.
I have one
And you
called
have- right.
yeah, Enterprise, and it hasn't had any. It's been 3 years old now, and it's never gotten anything.
And it produces, has it?
And it hasn't produced
Hasn't
yet
produced
because
yet,
it's.
right,
I
3
mean,
years
we're
old,
talking.
okay.
I got it. I actually grafted
Grafted
it
it?
onto a stalk, and so I've started from zero.
Okay.
But it's 3 years old now, and it's taller than me, so that's good.
All right. So yeah, that's another option for you, Miss Deborah. So I hope this helps you out. So Celeste, Joellen, thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you.
All right.
Very good.
Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Go to familyplotgarden.com to get all sorts of gardening information. We have over 500 videos and lots of information. I'm Chris Cooper. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe. Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. False cypress and spirea are great landscape options. Today we're going to talk about them. Also, if you're thinking about hiring a landscape professional, we have a few tips to help you out. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Joellen Dimond. Joellen is a TSU Extension agent in Tipton County, and Celeste Scott is here. Celeste is a UT Extension agent in Madison County. Thanks for joining us.
Son. Container is a good place to put them. In fact, the smaller varieties really do well in rock gardens. And the new hypertufa containers that they're making, they always want a dwarf, chamacypris to put in there because they're so unique and they're so small.
Okay.
They're relatively free of insect pests too. Nothing really
That's a good thing.
gets on them. Now I have seen bagworms get on them, but of course, bagworms get on
They get on everything.
They get on.
Right. That sounds pretty good though.
It's easy care. I like that.
Yeah.
Put it in a pot. Doesn't need much water. Can take some sun.
I think I could do that.
Cute little specimen plants. That sounds exciting.
Now there's one more I want to mention.
Go ahead and mention.
And that is the false cypress that is native to the United States.
Oh, sure. By
There's
all means.
one that's native, twisted, and some of them are just like little cords.
Oh, damn.
And they're all very, very interesting and unique in their own shapes and sizes. They like well-drained soil.
Okay. Okay.
So we don't tend to have that so much in the South, in this area. So, try to create a condition where there is a well-drained area.
Okay.
Now, I have successfully planted these in the ground, but I was careful of where I placed them. And I've had them for years.
Okay.
But you do have to worry about that. And they do like sun, so don't give them too much shade.
Full sun?
Not full sun.
Not full sun, just-
But the larger varieties like full sun. But the smaller varieties could use some shade here in this area.
Okay.
But they can take quite a bit, which is why they only stay inches tall.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay.
And the larger ones are used like hedges, in the landscape. You can get several of them and make a little hedge, get different kinds, and mix it up with other plants because you don't want a monoculture in a hedge. Then some of the smaller ones, because they're so unique in their shapes and sizes and colors that they're mostly used as specimens. You can put them in a container or just in the landscape, but you don't en masse plant them.
Okay.
It's not one of those kind of plants. It's more of a specimen specialty plant.
Okay.
And of course, the chamaecyparisses that are most used in the South are the obtuse and passifera varieties and cultivars of those, and there are many of them, many, many, many. A lot of the leaves are curled and.
Thanks for having us.
All right, Joellen, we're going to talk about some great landscape options. The first one we'll talk about, false cypress. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the chamaecyparis. There's a lot of them. It's a coniferous evergreen, which means it stays green all year long, which is nice in the landscape. There is a very large, diverse group. There are 60 feet plus trees in it, and there are dwarf miniature plants that only measure in inches. So
that is dwarf.
That is, it's a very diverse group and large. Now, some of them are fast growing and some of them are slow growing.
Okay.
The ones that are fast growing tend to be the larger ones. Some of the rock garden and small ones, they don't grow very fast at all.